Greetings folks, in this video I tried something new. I decided to try and build my own printable and then wearable helmet. And when I decided to do this, there was just one character that sprung to mind. And that's the old school Optimus Prime as he appeared in the 1986 animated movie. Easily the best Transformers movie ever made. With one of the best soundtracks to go with it too. Not only is it the first 3D printed helmet that I've made, but it's the first STL that I've made myself as well. So it's 2 for 1, kinda. It's not a Blender tutorial because it literally took me so long to do, it was quite embarrassing. And I'm definitely not the right person to speak to when it comes to making helmets in Blender. In fact, as you'll find out, I went back and forth and redid things so many times I ended up stopping recording myself to avoid embarrassment. But I'm learning, and this is the first step. So follow me through the pain of making it in the first place, then printing it out, finishing it, giving it a paint job worthy of the OP himself, and finally getting to wear the damn thing. And even more, the STL is available free to my paid Patreon members as a bit of a thank you for the support, but also available on Etsy. Links in the descriptions. And I know it's a bit early in the video for this, but if you wouldn't mind watching as much of the video as you can without leaving, that really helps signal to the algorithm that people like my content. And what's even better, if you could like it and pop a comment down below to say maybe which one of the Transformers should I try next. Right, let's crack on. So a while ago, before the days of my YouTube channel and getting into 3D printing as much as I have done recently, I decided to try and make this just because I wanted to see if I could do 3D stuff in Blender. And I was pretty proud of it, but it took a ridiculous amount of time. I don't want to tell you how many iterations of it there is, but it's stupid. And it's certainly not fit for 3D print. There's loads of mistakes on it and it would just take far too long to fix everything. Well, recently I thought to myself I'll revisit what I tried a few years ago and see if I can remember the stuff that I taught myself a few years ago, but try and do it a little bit more seriously and a little better so that I can actually make an STL helmet that I can sell or pass on to you guys. And that got me thinking. Well, to be brutally honest, it got me thinking about getting ChatGPT to think for me. So after asking it to do a relatively realistic Optimus Prime based on a 1986 animated film, this is what it came up with, which I personally think looked way over the top and over-designed and lack any kind of character. So I set about giving it a go. As you can see, I changed my mind a few times on the particular reference image to use as a guide. And though this isn't a Blender tutorial, unfortunately, well, actually fortunately, because you do not want to learn Blender from me, because shortly after sitting down to do this Optimus Prime, I realised I'd pretty much forgotten everything that I spent so long trying to learn when I did that Space Marine helmet. I had intended to take people through how I did it, but because I restarted that often for the same little things, I got so exasperated that I actually stopped recording myself. But things changed when I decided to go back to basics. You see, I really love, and I mean really love, the 1986 animated movie. And I thought, why not start a bit simpler and do one that is just really faithful to the movie and done in the cartoon style? Because it's a lot simpler, a lot easier, and I thought if I can get to grips with that as I learn a little bit more and get a bit more used to it, then I can add some more detail later and do another version that's like the more realistic one. And at the end of the process, I have 2 helmets. Well, I have to say, originally, it wasn't going to be wearable. It was just going to be a half or quarter scale bust. But in the end, I decided to, yes, start again and make it completely wearable from the ground up. But actually, that's skipping ahead a bit because I did run off a few test prints. And actually now thinking back, it was then when I saw the initial print in front of me thinking, you know, all I have to do is make it a bit bigger and do it a little bit better. And this could actually be a wearable helmet. So that's what I did. But not after doing a fair few new revisions. You know, I was even working on this on my holiday in Scotland when I could have been hiking about the Highlands, but no. Well, it was something to do on a rainy afternoon. And things weren't helped when I got back by me doing stupid things like forgetting to change my support settings and having them completely in contact with the model and completely welded on. And it was a particularly fun and happy afternoon when I finally done a really great workable, wearable helmet printout, and I thought, that's it, I've done it, and then realised that the inner spikes were pointing inwards instead of outwards. That day sucked balls. But this is where I ended up. A human-sized, wearable Optimus Prime helmet based on the 1986 animated film that's slightly different from the G1 design. It's done in multiple parts to make for easy printing, with the largest part being the sides and the middle spikes and the wrap around the back of the head being sized at approximately 26 by 30 by 24 centimeters. And you can see how that looks on the roughly 325 centimeter squared build plate of the HUD, The sides and the back section print virtually without any supports. There's just some needed around the back collar at the bottom. You can see some of the support structure that you can fit the cap part onto, and also the sort of locator pins for the sort of ear sections, if that's what you call them. Now the cap, I did have the sort of Mohican part, or whatever you want to call it, as a separate piece, but it was just proving just too difficult to make sure it was going to fit correctly, so it all ended up being welded together, and it prints off really nice. This part you can see here actually docks into the side part at the back to make it nice and secure and make it feel like more like one piece. I made the bottom really flat, which meant having to take off the underside of the brim, which might seem a bit silly, but that brim then prints out really nicely because it's got its own flat bottom as well. And it does stick back to the underside of the main cap brim really easily, especially if you've already printed off the faceplate and put the magnets in, because you've just attached the faceplate to the underside of the helmet brim and use the faceplate as a guide to offer up the underside of the brim, and it sticks perfectly, as you can see here. There's holes for 10x5mm magnets. Just thought, get that extra strength in there. And the face mask sits into sort of a recess in the cap as well, so that kind of hides all the magnets and works really nicely. And here are all the settings. I'm using the 0.4 nozzle, the high flow one as well. Also calibrated the PLA mat to take into account the high flow. I don't know how much of a difference it's made. There's probably some numbers somewhere that, I don't pay a lot of attention to. I'm using the 0.12 fine default settings really, apart from just changing the seam to nearest, because I just saw something that said that might be useful. That's about as scientific as I get with it sometimes. For strength, just kept everything the same, pop and changed the infill to gyroid and set it to 8%. Nothing's changed on the speed. Everything's quite out of the box, apart from a few little tweaks. Support type, tree auto tree slim, and then the top Z distance I've just set to just under double the layer height. Seems to make it very, very good in terms of the sport qualities, but also super easy to get off. The big part took 767 grams, and what's that? 1 day, 14 hours to print. The cap and the Mohican, we're looking at just over 500 grams and just over 1 day and 4 hours. Most of the rest of the parts took just over 400 grams and just over 21 hours. And what I nearly forgot to show you was the sort of ear antennas, which was just 25 grams and a little over 2 hours. So I was like ridiculously happy with the quality of the print. I remember seeing FDM helmets years back, and I never got into them because all I saw was videos of people having to put Bondo or car filler in the, as we call it in the UK, to fill in huge steps of, layer lines. But now it's like barely anything, just at the, there's the weird seam there across the middle and just some layer lines visible at the top. And it's the first helmet I've done. And like I say, I'm just really glad that, okay, I don't mind a little bit of sanding and that's actually quite therapeutic, but I don't want to have to keep putting on layers of fix or filler and stuff. So we'd already printed a few test runs and I knew that this was going to fit okay. I did have to go back and remodel the entire curvature of the dome and the way that it met up with the sort of geometry within the Mohawk bit, because the Mohawk bit was almost having like ghosts of geometry once printed. So I was really happy with the way this came out in the end. That's what I mean by ghosts on the right hand side there, on my right thumb on this old earlier version. Not to sound boring, but it was just down to not having enough geometry in that section, so I had to redo it. Going back to the final version though, you can see where the cap sort of sits in with the side and back sections there with those little platforms I made. Pretty nifty. Here's a closer look at the face mask. Looks pretty smooth. You can still see a little bit of the layer lines very slightly, but really minor. Only a few minor imperfections fixed. The earpieces came out super smooth. Sort of got a little bit of push to them, so they can actually sort of hold on without any glue, but obviously best to put a bit of glue on in there. And the antennas just slotting quite nicely. So as mentioned before, I use these 10x5 2kg pull magnets. This is more than strong enough. Give a really firm grip. And the holes are just sized just right for a nice firm push fit, but obviously you'll need a little bit of glue at the bottom to just hold them in place, because without glue, they will pull each other out of the holes, but there's a nice snug fit again. And then once I was happy with everything fitting together again, it was out with sandpaper. I think I started with just sort of quite rough, actually, I think it was about 80 grit, or maybe 120, just to take some of the more obvious lines and textures down pretty quickly. And you know what, as much as I sort of thought I'd dread the sanding, I knew I'd dread the filling. That's why I avoided the filling side of things as much as possible. Well, actually, I don't think I did any filling. Everything fitted together really quite snug without need for that. But yeah, I thought I might dread the sanding, but I actually found it really therapeutic. Just stick something on the telly and just sit there polishing away. Very satisfying to sort of see everything sort of smoothing out before your eyes kind of thing. Wear a mask as well while you're doing this. Make sure no dust is getting breathed in. And those of you that have seen some of my older videos might go, where's the resin getting slapped all over it with a massive paintbrush and a load of mess? Yeah, believe it, I thought that would be a bit ridiculous, and I thought, you know what, just going to do it the old-fashioned way for a change. Like I say, I started at around 80, so then I did 120, then 200, 400. I think you roughly double it if the information I read online was correct. So you can get through sanding pretty quick to a nicer finish, but anything more than double, I think it's kind of runs the risk of you not hiding the scratch lines of the previous pass. So there's only a couple of minutes per run, so it didn't take too long. I do think I would have possibly got away with filler primer from the get-go for most of the part. Maybe apart from the top of the cap bit, it was a bit more obvious, but it's worth doing because you can see here just how much surface imperfections and irregularities it's revealing once it's had a pass or two of sanding. So once that was done, you don't need to see all the sanding. That'll just be here for about 3 hours. Actually, now it's probably about 2 hours. Not exactly the most engaging part of the video, if that was the case. I went for this high filler automotive primer. Well, I went for the high fill because obviously there's no fine details, so just thought get like quick wins with it. Gave each piece a couple of coats, and each coat I just sprayed until it started looking slightly wet in places, but not running, of course. Not that it would matter because you just sand it down anyway. And left it a good overnight or 24 hours, I think, until I started sanding it, just make sure it cured properly, not just drying. You've got to make sure it cures as well. Now, onto the even more fun sanding, if that is such a thing, the wet sanding. This is where it really starts feeling and looking really smooth, and you think that you're making a lot of progress. Well, you are making a lot of progress, and it kind of does seem worth the effort in the end. But this is where it sort of suddenly transforms, and this takes me back to when I was like 16, 17-year-old, starting my A-levels in design and technology and woodwork and stuff like that, and I think that's probably what sparked off the bug of making stuff like this. But in those days it was just machined out of wood on a really shit lathe. None of this modern tech, well, it was 30 years ago. Now I have to admit I didn't really look into the best way of sanding stuff, just what I just had in my data banks and my brain. So if I'm doing anything inefficient, which I probably am, just let me know in the comments. And also, if you wouldn't mind dropping a like and subscribe, if you're still watching the video at this point, I really appreciate it. You can show your support in all kinds of different ways, but if you like, share, subscribe, if you're not subscribed, and also you can look at down below for some links for other ways of supporting me, like financially, be super helpful because there's lots of filament to buy and stuff like that. But don't go off YouTube just yet. Make sure you watch a couple more of my vids, like the legend that you are. Now back to the sanding. You might think this is tedious and mind-numbing, and though I'm not talking about this stage of my video, although some people might think it is, I hope not. But somebody did say in my comments with a bit of feedback that they would literally just sit and watch somebody sand for hours on end. So sit back and relax, or just go to sleep, because what follows now is 15 hours of me just sanding and sanding and sanding. Nah, of course not, only joking. But if it comes to sanding, if you don't really like the idea of it, unfortunately you've got to just grit your teeth and get on with it. Talking of grit, see what I did there. I think I started at 200, then went 400, 600. There's probably a bit more of a scientific way of doing this, an established way of doing this. I probably should have looked it up, but I guess I went off instinct really. I just was curious to see if what I had in my brain was correct. When before priming and then before the first layer of paint, just make sure everything's wiped off with a wet cloth, get rid of all the dust. Went for this Plasti Dip Blue, I thought might look pretty cool. Just got it off Amazon, didn't know if it's any good or not, never tried it before. It was just the #1 recommendation from Amazon, which obviously not always should be followed, but well, as they say, fortune favours the brave, and more often than not, the bloody idiots too. I'll leave it up to you to decide which of those I am. But I'm happy to report it went on pretty well. I did the first coat pretty light, gave that at least 30 minutes. Oh, and obviously make sure you shake the can up like crazy. I tried not to get the paint too wet, even though he does sort of say, you know, get an even wetness. But for the first couple of coats, I wanted it just to bite in first. And build it up, as it says on the back of the can, as many times as you want. Well, usually around 5 should do it, it says, so that's what I went for. Sprayed all the other parts, and yeah, it looked great. It's quite susceptible to dust and marks and stuff though, so I had to sort of handle it. I probably should put some sort of clear coat over the top, but I was just kind of wanting to skip the steps and get this thing done and filmed, really. Things weren't quite as great for the faceplate. I went for this, it's actually like a metallic, really light grey with some more metallic flecks in there. The same range as the blue plastic dip stuff. And despite shaking it to death with the right hand wrist action of an absolute veteran, it did come out really sort of bitty, shall we say. The flecks just sort of stood out with the paint, so I don't know if I was spraying too far away or the vent was drying the paint slightly, just it's sort of almost like it's atomized before it hit the surface, and hadn't really realized until I'd finished spraying, to be honest. So I ended up sanding it down a little bit and then airbrushing with a sort of mix of quite bright silver and a little bit of light grey white mix, just so it didn't look too, you know, blatantly fake silvery, because his faceplate is almost, you know, kind of 95% white, isn't it, really? But I thought I'd put some metallic in there because he's a bloody robot at the end of the day. And the last bit of painting to do was the crest. So I just had to mask off the edges just to make it look like it was a separate panel on the front. I could have modelled that a separate panel, actually. That would have been quite handy, but maybe next time. Now with the eyes, I just printed that in crystal clear on the M7 Pro. Just attached them here. They're a little bit thick, actually, the original one, so I went back and I've updated them with some thinner versions. You can still get the thicker ones if you like. I don't know if they might be better at casting a blue LED glow if you were so fancied. And just attached them with a bit of hot glue. Completely impossible to see out of, but I think there's a way of making them a little bit clearer with some kind of polish or something like that. And with everything finally stuck together and complete, here is the big boy himself, and a few of his more ugly siblings. And when you compare him to the reference from the film, I'm pretty happy with the accuracy, to be honest. I went back and forth more than a few times to try and get it as close as I could, which is actually quite difficult at times, considering they changed how he looked every 5 seconds. I just hope I did his memory proud. And just to show that it's wearable and looks super cool, here's me wearing it and looking super cool. It's sized using Budwin's sizing heads, STL, that I put into Blender, using head 4, which is the average apparently, with a circumference of 22.9 inches and a hat size of 7¼ inches, which fits me perfectly anyway. Obviously add what padding you need. So it just remains for me to say thanks for watching so far. Thanks for all the incredible support as always. If you would like to continue to support me, even just a like or a comment would be amazing. If you want to head over to my channel or play through the playlist that should be on the side of the screen, you'll see a bunch of my other videos where I'm usually doing statues and figurines and stuff. So stick around. If you're new to the channel, check out some of my other vids and hopefully you'll find something of use. Right, I'll catch you later.